Hello, everybody. So, every one of you who grew up in the heyday of children's animated programs, like I did, always seems to have that one show which absolutely captured their obsessions more than anything else. Some of you who know me in real life already know what that particular show for me must be, and well, I guess the title and thumbnail for this video has pretty much clued in the rest of you as well. But yes, I am absolutely a SpongeBob SquarePants child. Having been born in the early 90s with the premiere of the first episode of SpongeBob in May of 1999, timing perfectly with my entry into elementary school, quite simply, all the elements aligned to have me hooked right from the get-go. There certainly were other Nicktoons predating SpongeBob that also held my interest, but really, how could anything else compete with the nautical nonsense offered up by Steven Hillenburg's creation? So naturally, it would only make sense that I would own one of these. So this is my SpongeBob SquarePants CRT TV. These themed televisions were quite popular novelty items in the early 2000s, and those of you who are also in this hobby, or having grown up around this era like I did, are well aware of the wide assortment of character TVs that were available at the time. Pretty much every popular children's franchise received an example of one of these theme sets, with CRT designs featuring Batman, Spider-Man, Ninja Turtles, Shrek, Hello Kitty, Disney princesses, and so many others having been on the market at one point or another. There are certainly a few other themes that are highly desirable for some collectors, but given my attachment to the source material, the SpongeBob theme set is absolutely the most coveted one for me. So, as usual, let's start off by examining the components that make up this tube. So, in reality, these televisions are quite basic CRTs for the era. Along the front lies all of your basic controls, as well as a composite video input, a headphone jack, and the single mono speaker. And we find even less items of interest along the back, with only the second composite input and the coaxial RF port available for additional connections. You might notice that my particular TV is actually missing its coax terminal. Sadly, at some point before I took possession of it, the connector was severed from the RF modulator, unfortunately rendering this input inoperable on my example. Even just looking around under the hood here with the back cover removed, it's quite apparent just how bare bones this television actually is. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if these components here are the absolute bare minimum needed to make a CRT function. Compare this to something like this Sony Trinitron, and the cost cutting is certainly more apparent. Funny enough, though, you can actually tell that this chassis was designed to offer much more options when you examine the rear case of the TV. While from the exterior, you only see the cutouts for the aforementioned coax and composite ports. If you flip the shell around and take a look at the panel from the inside, you can easily see the cutouts for a possible component video input and even a SCART connector. These holes, of course, are simply the result of the shell being a generic mold design that could be used for a wide variety of different models. Despite these shortcomings, though, the designers of this television did manage to squeeze in some special features into the set, as the TV actually features a custom on-screen display. There is an assortment of different SpongeBob icons that appear on the screen when you access certain menus and options. They even included this screensaver-like animation and these teeny little SpongeBobs for the volume display. But since we're talking about the operation of this television right now, I might as well bring up this set's Achilles heel. So remember that issue with the Toshiba television that I featured in a previous video, where you needed the remote control in order to access the inputs? Yes, unfortunately, this flaw also plagues the SpongeBob TV as well. These component inputs are completely inaccessible without the remote. I know on some televisions, these inputs can sometimes be hidden below channel 1 on the tuner, but sadly, just like on the Toshiba that I showed earlier, going under channel 1 just cycles back around to the top of the band at channel 125. In my case, I am in fact missing the OEM remote for my SpongeBob TV, but thankfully I was able to program a universal remote to work with this tube. Curious enough, even though the television was distributed by Emerson, the SpongeBob TV actually uses an entirely different manufacturer's remote code. If you have one of these TVs and are trying to pair a remote to work with it, try code 1611 on yours. That's the one that ended up working out just fine for me. But okay, now that we've got the TV powered up, let's check out how that tube looks. So naturally, the only thing that makes the most sense displaying on the SpongeBob CRT would of course be the SpongeBob plug-and-play TV game dating from around the same era. This goofy thing has 5 built-in games featuring SpongeBob and his friends throughout Bikini Bottom. For a brief overview of these games, SpongeBob's Bubble Pop is an Arkanoid Breakout clone. Sandy's Surf Adventure is a horizontally scrolling shmup. Invasion of the Hooks is, I guess you can say, kinda sorta like a really dumbed down variant on Atari's Missile Command. Patrick in the Maze is a dungeon crawler exploration game. And the Super Chum Bucket is a single-screen platformer akin to Donkey Kong. Honestly, all of these games are quite basic and very clunky, no doubt in part because of the controller's rather jank construction quality. Now, I didn't grow up with this thing, so therefore I have absolutely no nostalgia for the games on this plug-and-play whatsoever. So, at least in my opinion, this thing kind of sucks. I would say that the most interesting game on here would be Patrick's Maze, but even so, the amount of content in this tide pool is quite shallow indeed. But, of course, it does pair with this television spectacularly, so why wouldn't I include it in this video? But having access to the composite inputs on this TV, though, doesn't limit us to just the plug-and-play. There's absolutely nothing stopping us from connecting something silly like an Xbox 360 and playing games with subject matter that otherwise would be completely inappropriate when matched with this television's theme. Admittedly, I had a blast recording this footage for my video here. I love how ridiculous of a contrast this is, evading the police after committing a violent carjacking in Grand Theft Auto 4, while viewing the whole ordeal on the SpongeBob TV. Perhaps this is the first time ever that one of these televisions has depicted someone walking into a gentleman's club where they are free to— Daisy! I was just looking for the sports channel, Daisy. But, of course, if you ignore video games, perhaps the most appropriate content to view on this television would be, of course, episodes from SpongeBob SquarePants. I've got to say, despite the relative cheapness of the components that went into the manufacturing of this television, some video content actually looks really good on this little screen, particularly DVDs. The image is really sharp and pretty colorful. You wouldn't assume that the performance of this tube would be anything special, but I find myself really liking this CRT. Honestly, the only major downside for me would be the lack of stereo sound, being that the majority of the content I consume makes use of 2 speakers. For that reason alone, this is why I would usually choose one of these televisions that do support stereo sound over the SpongeBob TV. However, this is definitely the CRT from my collection that I love showing off the most. Whenever I have it on public display, it always gets the largest reactions compared to all the other tubes that I own. Here's a moment from when I had it set up in a local game store, and every guest in the shop had to stop what they were doing and gather around to view the climax of the episode Band Geeks together. It's moments like these that make this hobby all so enjoyable for me. So yeah, while the whole shtick of this particular CRT all revolves around its novelty theming, it is that theming alone that elevates it from just a low-tier consumer set to something of a total nostalgia blast that is pretty much intended for me. As someone who adores this show, why wouldn't I have the SpongeBob TV in my collection of tubes? I mean, if this video alone has it out of me as a total dork just yet, let the fact that I have my original ticket for the SpongeBob movie framed serve as evidence for how dearly I hold this show to my heart. And best of all, this particular television was a rescue as well. My friend found this TV for me at the dump of all places. I am so grateful he was able to save this television from being destroyed, especially since it still functions excellently. Apart from that broken RF module, the only other issue with this tube is a small scratch on part of the screen's glass, but when powered up, you can't even see that it's there. Wyatt, buddy, I am indebted to you for finding this television for me. Thank you. But yeah, that's a look at my SpongeBob SquarePants CRT television. These theme sets aren't for everyone, but this particular one certainly is destined to be part of my collection. As always, I thank you for joining me on another episode of Steve's Assorted Stuff, and stick around if you'd like to check out even more of this collection as I feature them in upcoming videos. In the meantime, rock on, you goofy goobers, and have a great day, everybody.